Right. Good morning. Welcome to Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, top line. The Mishnah said that you're allowed to do Eruv with everything, with the exception of water and salt. The Gemara now brings a statement from Rabbi Yehuda. Do you learn from principles? What is the Gemara inside? Even when the Mishnah says chutz, it's not referring necessarily to our Mishnah. Even in the case where it says chutz, we don't learn from a klal. Because if the Mishnah says, for example, all these things are mutter, all these things are asa, it doesn't mean dafka. Sometimes there can be exceptions to the rule. Even when it says chutz, the Gemara is b'daik a small nakuda over here. That since the Mishnah, the Rabbi Yehuda says, even in a case where it says chutz, was Rabbi Yehuda discussing our Mishnah? This is a difficult. The answer is no. Why? Because since our Mishnah says chutz, so therefore it wouldn't be necessary for him to say, even in a case where it says chutz. Because obviously our Mishnah says chutz. The fact that he says, in the medium in our klolis, even in a case it says chutz, he was talking about obviously a different Mishnah. Says the Gemara. Since he said, even in the case where it says chutz, so obviously he wasn't going on our Mishnah, because if he was going on our Mishnah says chutz. So therefore, why did he have to say that even in the case where it says chutz? So where was he going about? Where was he discussing? Which Mishnah was he talking about? Awesome koi. Koi mitzvahs aseish as man groma, anoshim chayovim, noshim peturis. All mitzvahs aseish man groma, when a woman chayav una potter. V'sheloi as man groma, mitzvah which not as man groma. The Gemara explains all this in detail. Echad noshim chayovim. And now Rabbi Yehuda said about that this principle, that kol, we don't have to take it to be literally all. The klolo is all of them. The mitzvah aseish man groma, noshim peturis. And mitzvah matzah, the mitzvah of matzah, which is the mitzvah says man groma. Why mitzvah groma? Because you only chayav on Pesach, and yet we not chayav. Why we not chayav? Yeah, that's not what Rashi says. Not what Pesachim says. It's because the pasuk says, "Don't eat chametz, eat matzah." Anybody who's included in the isam not eating chametz must eat matzah. Women are not allowed to eat chametz. Why not allowed to eat chametz? Because a loisa say all women are chayav. It makes a difference. So matzah the chayav, simcha, mitzvah of simcha on Yom Tov. Why women are chayav? Because it says the samachta ata ubeisecha, you and your household. So there's a mitzvah of simcha for women as well. The hakim, which is also a mitzvah seishvan goma on the first day on the Chalmud Sukkos. The mitzvah seishvan goma with noshim chayavis. Now became women are chayav. So if we can't say it's a general rule, furthermore. The Chavis say Shiur as man goma noshim chayavis. Every say which is not as man goma woman chayav. I Talmud Torah, mitzvah of Talmud Torah, which is not mitzvah man goma. A person is mechuyev to learn all the time. So some mitzvah man goma. Woman are chayav. Why woman chayav? Why? Sorry, woman are potter. Why woman potter? Because we say in Shvav, to teach it to your sons, don't say your daughters. Having children, which is mitzvah say Shiur as man goma, and yet women are potter. Why the potter? Why the potter? I know we pass on the potter. Why the potter? V'chivshua. The pasuk says, "Puvu v'chivshua ish da'ke lichbei shedeshol." Upidina ben, because it says, "B'choy bonecho tivte v'loy b'noisecho." Your sons, not your daughters, and if you're not mechuyev to put, you don't have to be even the put. This says, "Shazan gomo noshim petuis." Elom aviyichlan ein ameidim naknois afilu b'mokish nema b'yichud. So kids, aviyichlan made the statement that even when we say kol all, it doesn't mean literally all. Says the Gemara, it doesn't mean our Mishnah, because he says even in the case it says chutz, and our Mishnah says chutz, he won't need to say even in the case it says chutz. So what was he talking about? The Mishnah says that all women says man goma woman potter, says man goma woman chayav, and we found exceptions to both rules. The Meiri says why a woman potter says man goma? Because the meshubad to the household, to the husbands, to the children, many times we had to babysit. Even yesterday, I had to come out suddenly trying to do something, and one of the children screams and he goes to the bathroom. He suddenly realized this. Chazal knew what they were saying. A woman it's very difficult. It's shy because of what they're doing is so important and it's such a shibud that it's impossible for them to stop everything they're doing just for mitzvah seishvan goma. Okay, so choshvei, it shows the importance of how important it is what a woman is doing. Well, a person has to speak about this to his wife. That's right. They'd have to realize that the Chofetz Chaim, the Chofetz Chaim told his wife not to daven because she was so busy looking after her children. He said to her that it's more important. The person has to be over this nakuda. It's not shy, it's less of importance. It's some greater importance. And you see that if you ever left alone with your children for a longer period of time, And what happens is you get to appreciate how difficult it is, indeed, what we have to do. We're now going to bring more examples where in the medium in Akrolus. So we're going to have another case. This is slightly more complicated rule. A zov which carries something becomes tummy. This is different from normal tumah, where when you carry something which is tummy, you become tummy. If you carry a dead person, you become tummy. Here we're talking about a tummy person carrying a Torah thing. So for example, let's say you've got a zov, and he's carrying 10 plates, and only touching the bottom plate. So the 10th plate, why is it tummy? The answer is because whatever zov carries becomes tummy. Anything which a zov is being carried on, toy. So let's say, for example, you've got a train and the zov's on it, or something like that, or a wagon, then that thing does not become tummy. We've had this many times. If a zov sits on a bed, what happens to the bed? Which level of tumah? Yeah, but which level is that? It's an avatuma. It's avatuma. If a human being carries a zov, let's say, for example, you give a piggyback to a zov, then you become then you become a kav. You just become a rishon. Mishkav and Moshe become
carrying it on your rishon.
That's right.
Yeah.
Avatuma. Vesuleka is it? This is the whole rule. Merkav. So here there's only one picture. Okay, we'll see it in a second. Hi, Merkav Echidom. Idi Yosef Alei. If you're sitting on the tiny Moshe. And I'm going to make a Gabba de Uchva. Gabba de Uchva, I was actually quite happy that they actually put a picture in it. It's not so often that people see this picture. It comes up a lot in the Gemara. Gabba de Uchva is a saddle handle, where it's number Reshu Daled. It's just a handle of a saddle. Well, what happens is you don't sit on the saddle, but it helps you ride. So therefore, that is something which is not got to Mas Mishkav or Moshav, that is the handle of the saddle. If you were to sit on the saddle, that would already have Merkav and Moshav. The handle of the saddle, Tanya, Arukav Tomei, Moshav Vatofus, Tomei Merkav. That which you grab onto, Arukav Tomei Moshav, sorry. So the Tanya, Arukav Tomei Moshav, it's Tomei because you sit on it. Vatofus Tomei Merkav is Tofus because of Tomei Merkav. But Lishmami, no, ain't made of that. Even when he says chutz, there's exceptions because the Mishnah never said it. And that's why it comes in our sugya. It says, you're allowed to Eiruvin with everything. If you'd have gone home yesterday, you might have gone and done your Eiruvin with every single thing except for water and salt. But it's not true. You can't learn from such a principle. Why? There's such a thing as mushrooms. And you cannot do your Eruv to chumin with mushrooms and truffles. Why can't you do it? Because it's not a normal food. People don't eat it on its own. It's interesting. It's an exception to the rule. You can't make it. Even when the Mishnah says all cases except, you cannot learn from it, and therefore the halacha is that even the Mishnah says you could do with everything, you can't do with everything. There's mushrooms which are exception to the rule. Next part of the Mishnah. As we said, I'm going to read out the Pasuk again. The Pasuk says about Ma'aser Sheni. That what happened in Ma'aser Sheni? You had produce. You took Ma'aser, you redeemed it on money, and now you're taking the money to Yerushalayim, you're going to buy with it food. Pasuk says, "For the Sata Kesef B'chol Hashotav Nafshecho, B'Boker B'Tzinu V'Yan V'Shecho B'chol Hashotshochem Nafshecho." So the Gemara says like this: "Akol Nikach Kesef Ma'aser B'Cholu, Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yisrael B'Chanina, Chad Masnei Eruv, Chad Masnei Ma'aser." One is discussing Eruv and one's discussing Ma'aser. The more explains in a minute. Chad Masnei Eruv Leishon Olamai Mifnei Atzmo Melech Mifnei Atzmo Dein Ma'arvin. You can't do an Eruv with water by itself or salt by itself, because neither of them is a proper food. If you mix the water and the salt together, me'arben, you could do it with chumin. Why? Because water and salt is a nice dip. Leila seder. What do you dip your potato in? Or your radish and salt water. So it's a good thing to do an eruv inside. One says this same halacha regarding Ma'aser Sheni. You can't buy Ma'aser Sheni money for water by itself or water salt by itself. But if you want to go to Yerushalayim and buy salt water, then you're allowed to buy salt water with the Ma'aser Sheni and more expensive. If you're allowed to buy with your Ma'aser Sheni money salt water, you're allowed to use it for Eiruvin. One says about Eruv, my time of Perubin, you need a fruit. Why is it a bigger chiddush by Ma'aser Sheni more than Eiruvin? Does anybody know?
Because Ma'aser Sheni eating it.
And also, the idea is it's your food. The answer is Ma'aser Sheni is deraisa. Ma'aser Sheni, the Torah says buy food. If Chazal allowed you to buy salt water, so obviously they would allow you for Ruvei Tchum, which is only D'Rabbanan, to rely on salt water. But the Manon says that for Ruvei Tchum will say salt water is good enough for food. It doesn't tell you that Ma'aser Sheni, which is the Issa D'Oraisa, to buy something which is not food, is good enough. So if you say that halacha by Ma'aser Sheni, kavachim by Eruv. If you say that halacha by Eruv, it's not necessarily follows that by Ma'aser Sheni same halacha. Also, Rav Yitzchak Masli Ma'aser, he said it's referring to Ma'aser. Meisvei. Hey, the Yehuda and Goddess if they have a lezer, should base out of my father's household, the Yeruchin see because of Ma'aser. They buy fish juice with Ma'aser Sheni money. They'll go to Shlam, buy fish juice as a tip. Oh my Lois, he said to him, when did they allow you to buy fish juice? Is only if they had the inside of the fish mashed into the juice, where the inside of the fish is something substantial, but fish juice by itself not. But even the first man was more maker, because he said fish juice alone is good enough for Ma'aser Sheni. Look at the Shumna de Peira. Even he only agreed that you're allowed to use fish juice. Which fish juice, if you ask you what's more substantial, fish juice or salt water, of course fish juice is much more substantial. The more later we'll discuss why fish is considered a fruit, you have to buy food. The fact is fish juice is a real food. Salt water is not a real food. So how can you say they're allowed to buy with Ma'aser Sheni money? Salt water, one man said only if the inside of the fish is mashed in. The other one said fish juice. But both of them agree that salt water is no good. So how can you say that salt water is okay? We're talking about salt water where you added oil. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, you added oil. What's the chiddush that you're allowed to buy salt water which has got oil inside of the Ma'aser Sheni money? What is the chiddush? Maybe salt water is meaningless. So what? But the fact is, the oil is what you're buying. You want to buy oil. We'll see in a second. Maybe we'll say what the Lord's going to say. But let's just say, what's the chiddush? Chiddush was even salt water. But if you added oil, so then there's no chiddush because oil is a good food. What happens like this? Let's say the oil costed £1 and the salt water costs another £1. You pay £2 for the oil. And everybody realizes that what you're really doing is you're really paying for the salt water as well. And the chiddush is that you're allowed to. Do you remember when else we do have law? On the year of Shemitah for your esrog, you pay extra for your lulav, and then you don't pay for the esrog. Says the Gemara, are you allowed to indeed such a thing? That means, are you allowed to pay for something which is not Ma'aser Sheni quality food? Behavlo, and well says yes. Well, Tanya, as indeed the Brisa says, we have a long Brisa which discusses the idea that you're allowed to pay extra. I mean, for example, let's say a bottle of wine. Wine costs £5. The bottle, how much does the bottle cost? £1. So I'm allowed to pay £6 for the wine itself. Why? Because even though you might work it out in your mind that part of the money is going for the bottle, since I'm saying to you I'm paying for the wine, it is okay. Well, Tanya, indeed the Brisa says, but as we mentioned, the Pasuk says, Rashi says that all those words are spare. Teres says the words are not spare. Of course, not spare. You need every one of those words. Teres says the base in each one is spare. Ba boko, ba tzin, ba yain, ba shecho. It's easier to understand Teres. So therefore, we'll dash like Teres. Each one of these bases is spare. So we're going to have 4 drashas on the basis. But back again, ba boko, melamed, shloichin boko agaba oiroi. Let's say, for example, I come to the market with my Ma'aser Sheni money and I say I want to buy a cow. And they say to me, look, it costs £100. But you know and I know that part of the cost of the cow is the leather. Now, the leather nobody's going to eat. And after Picane, you're allowed to do it. I say it's because it's Pablo. Yes, and then afterwards, you'll use your leather to buy to Sefer Torah to make shoes. That doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you paid Pablo for the... Oh, that's the Chiddush. I should point that out. Well, we talk about... Yeah, that's right. Even though it's understandable. Oh, that's a good example. Yes. Even though, for example, let's say I say to you, will you live with my son 5 times a week? And I pay you £100 for the 5 times. And one of them is Shabbos. But since I'm not saying to him specifically, it's the same thing. Okay. So again, let's get it clear. What?
I'm thinking about Kaira.
About Kaira, same thing. Oh. About Boko. As you pointed out, you'd be allowed to keep the skin. So I've got £100 of Ma'aser Sheni money. I spend the £100 on the cow, even though £10 of it is going to go on the skin. But as long as I can't buy the skin separately, obviously, because then I'm not buying food. Similarly, you're allowed to buy sheep with the wool. You can buy wine with a bottle. What they used to do is they used to take some sort of liquid, add pips of wine, and then the pips of the wine, and not just the pips, the peels, would give a flavoring to the water, and you'd pay even though the water itself was not really supposed to be paid by Shema money, because we have laws, therefore it's okay. Omar Avichon says like this: I understand all the drashas except for one. And anybody who could ever explain it to me, I'll be so grateful and I'll treat him with such respect, I'll treat him like my Rebbe. One who explains to me the drasha, the word Baboka, I'll take his clothes after him into the bathhouse, which was what he used to do for your Rebbe. So therefore, if you can explain to me why, he's got a problem with the drasha of Baboka. The more explains a great length. My time. All of these drashas make sense and understandable and needed. Why? Because I don't only use the word baboko. How am I in boko to Mr. Eiruvin should go for you? Had they only said one word boko, I'll say, I know why. Because you can't, when a cow's alive, you're not going to be able to buy a cow without the skin. What are you going to do? Skin it alive and then after it doesn't make any sense. You've got to buy the skin. So therefore, that's why the Torah permitted it to pay for the cow, even though it's including the skin, because I'm expected to skin the cow and then buy the cow. I would say, go for you, but you need the word soy, because you might have thought sheep. No. What you should do is shear the sheep completely, then sell it for Ma'aser Sheni. But to buy it with Ma'aser Sheni money when it's still got wool, mechatesa. That's why the Torah had to say tzoy. Because of Achmona Batzon, if the Torah only said tzoy, the end of the day, the wool is connected to the sheep. So therefore, if the Torah says to you, you're allowed to pay for the sheep, even though you've got the wool. But to pay for the bottle with the wine, it's not even connected. It's two separate entities. Because if the Torah said wine, have a minimum say without a bottle, the wine will spill all over the place. So therefore, it's impossible. So therefore, you're allowed to pay for the bottle. It's only flavoring. It's only a sharpness in the water. Maybe not. So that's why I need the drashas going up from boko downwards. Now let's go backwards. Because of Achmona b'Sheicha, I've only written the last of the drashas. Have in a my sheichot velekidis. The peru was a kind of fig, a date, which was so unpleasant that it was very, very bad, and it would make people shikar if they would eat it. Now, you might have thought that such a thing you're not allowed to buy Ma'aser Sheni money. Kamash malon sheichot. Sheichot means something which makes you alcoholic. That you're allowed to spend your money even on such a fruit. If the Torah only said sheichot, going backwards, I would not know that I'm allowed to spend my money on a bottle of wine, because I'd have said sheichot is for that fruit, but how do you know why? For the bottle. Because I'd have said wine, you need it for the bottle to guard it. But why do I need that bottle? Again, the Torah says 4 extra either bases or 4 extra words. Each of these is used for a drasha. Now, the Gemara works first one way and then the other way, because the Torah always limits as much as possible. The Torah says the least possible. It says, well, had the Torah start off with that baka, you said, that's because it's actually you can't skin it, but sewing where you can share it, not wine where it's 2 separate entities, maybe not. To temed b'sheicha, which is only a flavoring, maybe not. Now let's go backwards. If it was said only sheicha, I would have said it's referring to this kind of food that gives person shikha. If it only said wine, I would have said okay, because you need it to guard the sheep, the wool, you can take it off. If it only said wool, I would have said because you can shear it. But the baka is not necessary. If I've already been told that I'm allowed to spend my money on my sasheni on a sheep, even though included in the cost is the wool, kal v'chaymer, I'm allowed to spend my money including the leather, because you can't skin it alive. And there you cannot say that you need an extra chiddush. And here he adds another small point, which we're going to say in a minute, like this. Maybe if the Torah says sheep, it's not telling you the wool. Maybe it's telling you only the skin, because sheep also have leather. And then I still need another word to tell me the wool. And maybe the Torah said like this. If I would only said sheikh, yain, and soin, I would have said soin is coming to tell you for the skin, because I want to know wool. And then I still need that the Torah should say soin and baka, one for the wool and one for the skin. That means maybe it was necessary to say the word baka, that you shouldn't misunderstand soin to be only the skin and not the wool. That's why you need both. Maybe you'd have said that. Says, well, that's not true. Why not? Because had the Torah meant that, the Torah would never have used sheep as an example. Because sheep is not renowned for its skin. It's renowned for its wool. If the Torah was only trying to teach me that you're allowed to spend your money on the wool, on the skin, the Torah would have said, Shecha Yain Boko. The fact that the Torah said, Shecha Yain Tsoin, I would have already been able to work out both skin and wool. How would I have worked it out? I would have worked out all four. Why would I have worked out all four? Shecha because of Shecha, Yain because of Yain. And then Tsoin, I would have said as follows. It can't be trying to teach me the skin, because if it's only trying to teach me skin, I would have said Boko. Elamai is coming to teach me wool. Once I know I'm allowed to spend my Sheni money on wool, of course I know I can buy skin, because skin is much more attached and much more impossible to get rid of. It says, well, how did it turn over to the Boko? I would have said sheep for the skin, yes. Is also low, but not for the wool. Maybe the Torah word Boko, in order to teach you that sheep is wool and not that sheep is skin. If the Torah wanted to Boko, I would never have thought that sheep is coming to teach me skin. It's coming to teach me. It's coming to teach me not wool. It's coming to teach me skin. The Torah should have just written Boko, which is much more likely for the skin. When the Torah says sheep, the Torah is teaching you dafka sheep, dafka wool. Why does the Torah need to say if I'm allowed to spend my money on wool, I'm allowed to spend my money on skin. Anybody who gives me explanation what babaka mean, according to Ben Bagba, I would bring his clothes to the bathhouse. And now I'm struggling to decide what to do next. Should we just finish it? 2 minutes. Okay. But my committee, the Gemara later brings machlokas as to, are you allowed to use fish for my sasheni money? Are you allowed to use fish for my sasheni money? Let's very quickly. Are you allowed to use fish for my sasheni money? That's machlokas the Gemara brings. Now looking at the pasuk says, Bokotzin Yan Shecha. So the Gemara says over here, there's different ways to darshan. It's called kalu patu klal, ribu miut ribu. We've had this a couple of times. I'll say it very briefly. Ribu miut ribu means when the Torah says like this, b'chol hashatav nafshecha, anything you want. Then it says an example, and then it finishes off, u'b'chol hashatav nafshecha, anything that you want. Do we look at it as a ribu miut ribu, meaning anything you want? Miut means just to exclude one or two things. Ribu means to include everything else. Or kalu patu klal is like this. Klal is a general. Prat describes the klal. And therefore it's memayet much, much more. That machlokas defines the machlokas as to whether you're allowed to use fish. One second. Which say they're not allowed to use fish. The other ones who forbid fish, and the more expensive. Includes everything. Vibo means I include everything. So that comes to exclude a little bit. Comes to include everything. Vibo tells us we include everything, because that's the idea. My Rabbi Kolmili, or my Miat, Rableza Miat Sir, we're excluding fish juice. It's only coming to exclude salt and water, but even fish juice is okay. The other man says you have to have the inside. The Tanya Musata Kesef Chashatav and Avshcho Kal, Baboko Batzenu Bian Shecho Prat. Kalu Patu means like this. If I say to you, everybody's allowed to go outside, and then I say class 1, do I mean to say that class 1 is describing my original statement, and therefore it's limiting only to class 1? That's Kalu Prat. Or do I say everybody? By saying class 1, I'm just trying to exclude something. For example, exclude maybe class 7 because they're so much older than not. So therefore, that Kena Prat is with the Klal, and the Prat is describing the Klal. Vibu miut vibu is vibu means I include everything. Miut I'm coming to exclude something. So Gemara says the time goes good. Vashon avshcho kal rapok zeh man shechot prat. Vashon avshcho chatzu klal. Kol prat zu klal. Yaton ken prat. Ma prat befush prima fi is something which is generated by something. A fruit of a fruit is created by something else. V'gdulei karka comes from the ground. After prima fi v'gdulei karka. But Tanya Edoch ma prat befush v'az v'ades oretz. It came from the land, meaning Hashem created it from the land. Fish. They come to generate each other. Fish generate each other. Why? One fish bears another fish. And they come from the ground. Why do they go from the ground? Because anything which sustains itself from the ground is also considered growing from the ground. And fish live off the ground. It has to be created from the land. Dagim and Maya Ibru, they were created from water and not from the land. They were created from water. When Hashem created fish, He did not create them from earth, He created them from land. So He created them from sea. So therefore they're not included. We'll come back to it a bit more on Shabbos, but basically, if you don't klal ukvat klal, you're limiting yourself because the prat describes the klal. If you don't ribu miyot ribu, you're coming to include much more, and therefore the nafkamina is fish included in what you're allowed to spend your ma'aseh sheni money or not. Very good. Okay, we'll stop here.
Well done.
Yeah. Okay. It wasn't actually. I think.